All right, today we are diving deep into one of the most foundational stories out there. We're going to analyze the text from the first few chapters of the book of Exodus to really understand how a nation was forged in the fires of slavery.
I mean, that one question right there, it's just dripping with defiance. It perfectly sets the stage for this epic showdown, right? You've got a king who thinks he's a god going up against a god who's about to show him what real power looks like. So, this whole story is really the answer to that question. Let's break down how the text itself builds that answer.
So, where does this all begin? Well, it's generations after Jacob's family first showed up in Egypt. And what starts out as this amazing success story, 70 people growing into a nation so big they're called exceeding mighty, it turns into a total nightmare fast.
I mean, look at this timeline. It's a steep, brutal downhill slide. The very thing that made the Israelites successful, their sheer numbers, is what triggers Pharaoh's fear. He doesn't see them as an asset to his kingdom anymore. Nope, he sees a political threat, a military threat. And that fear pushes him from just oppressing them to a policy of, well, straight-up genocide. And right here, you see the first real line in the sand being drawn. It's a clash between the king's law and what the text calls a higher moral law. What's fascinating is how their defiance isn't painted as some political rebellion. No, it's framed as a direct result of their fear of God. And for that, the story says, they're rewarded. So in the middle of all this horror, with a death sentence hanging over every single newborn boy, the story zooms in on just one child. One kid, saved by his mother's incredibly desperate and frankly brilliant plan. Moses' life story is just one wild twist after another, isn't it? He's a Hebrew baby who should have died, but he gets raised as an Egyptian prince. Then he becomes a fugitive, a shepherd out in the middle of nowhere. And it's from that position, as far from the halls of power as you can possibly get, that he gets this divine call to go back and become the liberator for his people. And who exactly is calling him? Well, that's the central mystery the story is about to unpack. So, when Moses gets this call from a burning bush, which is already pretty strange, he asks a really practical question. He's like, okay, when I go to the Israelites and they ask me who sent you, what's his name? What am I supposed to say? And the answer he gets is, well, it's the core of the entire narrative. And you gotta understand, this wasn't just Moses being curious. He knew he couldn't just walk up to a bunch of slaves and the most powerful king on earth without some serious credentials. He needed to know the identity, the authority of the God sending him on what really seems like a suicide mission. So God's answer, I am that I am. This isn't just a name, like Bob or Steve. It's a statement about reality itself. It's not a description like the strong one or the wise one. It's a declaration of pure existence. God just is. This name basically positions God as the bedrock reality that everything else is built on. And beyond that really profound name, I am, the text keeps identifying God in another way, through his history with their ancestors. He's not some new God on the block. He's the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the one who made promises generations ago. This is all about faithfulness and showing that this has been the plan all along. And the text doesn't just give us a list of adjectives about God, it shows us who he is through his actions and his words. He's not some distant, abstract force. He sees, he hears, he remembers. He's going to use his power for justice. And maybe the most powerful part? He's deeply relational. He calls this entire nation of slaves his firstborn son. So this story isn't just introducing a new character, this God. It's laying out a whole new way to live. And it does that by putting these divine rules in stark contrast to the brutal reality of life under Pharaoh. What you get here is a complete flipping of the script, a total moral inversion. The text draws this incredibly sharp line. On one side, you have Pharaoh, the pinnacle of human power. And what does he command? Death and oppression. On the other side, you have fearing God, like the midwives did. And what does that lead to? Preserving life. It's a clear choice. So you start to see this clear blueprint for how humans are supposed to relate to God. It's all about reverence, a reverence that might even mean disobeying the king. It's about obedience to what God says, even when it's hard. And it's about a trust that has to hold on, even when things get worse before they get better. And here's a key point. Freedom isn't the end goal. The whole purpose of being free is to worship. The text also starts laying the foundation for how people should treat each other. You see it in Moses' early kind of impulsive acts of justice. But then there's this really unique part, the command to spoil the Egyptians by taking gold and silver. It's presented as a form of divine justice, a kind of reparations for generations of brutal unpaid slave labor. All right, so armed with this mission from God, a couple of miracles up his sleeve, and his brother Aaron to do the talking, the reluctant shepherd Moses heads back to Egypt, and he walks right up to the most powerful man on the planet. And there it is, the demand. It's so simple, so direct, and it's a massive challenge to everything Pharaoh stands for. Think about it. He's not just being asked to let go of his free labor. He's being told that some other God, the Lord God of Israel, has a bigger claim on these people than he does.
And Pharaoh's response isn't just no. He goes on the offensive. He punishes the Israelites just for asking. He basically says, oh, you have time to dream about freedom? You must be lazy. And his answer to their suffering is to inflict even more suffering, a calculated cruelty meant to just crush their hope completely.
And boom, that's the escalation. The battle lines are officially drawn. On one side, God's command, let my people go, so they can worship me. On the other, Pharaoh's countercommand, work them harder with less. It's a total clash of wills. The stage is set for this divine showdown, where God is finally going to answer Pharaoh's question, who is the Lord? In the most dramatic way possible.
So the story leaves us hanging right here, at this point of maximum tension. The people are suffering worse than ever. Their leader Moses is totally crushed and confused. And you've got these two immense forces, Pharaoh and God, on an absolute collision course. The big takeaway here is how perfectly the stage has been set. This isn't just a conflict to free some slaves. It's a conflict that's going to define the very identity of their God for every generation to come.